Okay, so we're on to the fourth and final core lecture on pollution. And before we start on pollution proper, I'm going to go back briefly to where we've got to so far, and especially, whoops, the previous core lecture on Solo's mechanisms. Natural resource demand and Solo's mechanisms. So where did all that get us? We started off by saying that when we just look at the DHSS model, and if we drop capital, we have this Cobb-Douglas function. And that's nice because it predicts that the factor share of R should be alpha. Okay, which is roughly true when we look at the long run evidence that the factor share of resources shows no clear trend. It's like stationary. So that's kind of nice, but this is a big black box, this Cobb-Douglas, what's really going on. When we look at the short run, we know that if we push the resource price up, the share will go up. If we cut resource quantity, the share will go up. So there's things going on in the medium to long run which counteract that. What are those things? It's all those three mechanisms. And all of them tend to bring the factor share back down. Yeah. If something happens to push the share of a resource up, all three mechanisms can kick in, right? We can get more efficient in using the resource, we can switch to other resources, we can switch to different products that don't need the resource. Okay, which of these mechanisms is more important? It is definitely the substitution between resources. Okay, that if resource 1 gets more expensive, we can shift to resource 2. This is the key mechanism, and we can actually see it in the data here. For instance, that if we narrow down on very specific resources, this fixed share thing doesn't hold anymore, right? When the price of iron goes up compared to aluminium, the share of iron goes down in the long run. And the share of aluminium, which got cheaper, goes up. The overall share of metals tends to stay the same. Okay. So this second mechanism is super powerful. And when we narrow down on very specific resources, this doesn't hold. But for big categories of resources like metals or fossil fuels, it tends to hold. Okay. So do I want to say any more here? So just as something to think about before the class, you could say, let's do a quick thought experiment. Let's say the price of coal goes up. Okay. What happens in the short run to the share of coal? And what happens in the long run to the share of coal? And why? Okay, and we're talking about real economies now. We're not talking about some model. We're just saying, look at imagine reality. Imagine there's a shock upwards to the coal price. What happens in the short run? What happens in the long run? Okay, and that is important to talk about before we get into pollution, because it turns out this second mechanism is absolutely critical to explaining the data and what is going on with regard to long run pollution. So I'll stop this video right here and get on to the next one.